It's kind of funny. It actually was something that started on the Glenn Beck Show. I did a segment about 2 months ago, I think it was now, where just before the House vote on cap and trade. And right in the middle of the segment, Glenn takes out a watermelon and starts cutting it up, right there on the set live. And she's like, do you know why I'm cutting open this watermelon? And I kind of stole his thunder a little bit. I think he thought I was just going to say, no, why? Tell me. But I stole his thunder. I went ahead and said, because it's just a thin layer of green on the outside and a communist red center all the way to the core. And, then I started thinking, does this go beyond sort of metaphor? Are there actual communist elements behind pushing for this bill? And, I took a look at Van Jones, of course, the White House Green Job Czar, and I saw, that as recently as 2005, he described himself as a communist.
Right.
And I started to look at the organization that he had come from, the Apollo Alliance, and, I discovered that its influence is far, far greater than sort of the tip of the iceberg that you see with its actual staff of 17 and its budget of a couple million and what have you, that they had managed to bring together under one umbrella and pointing in the same direction the various elements of the left, of the political left,
right.
The social justice street organizers, the big money labor unions, and the big environmental groups with access to billions of dollars of foundation money. And they'd managed to bring them all together for the purposes of raiding the U.S. Treasury and funding all of their various constituencies through, green jobs programs and other, so-called stimulus programs. And I was amazed to find that they had huge direct influence on the stimulus bill. They helped write it, and now they're helping write the grant proposals that local governments and universities and others are writing to get our federal dollars to make sure that they go to people who are on board their agenda. And it's enormously frightening because we frankly are already at a disadvantage funding-wise. The left is probably outspending us easily 10-1 on any issue that we care about. And now they're going to raid the U.S. Treasury for hundreds of billions of dollars to feed back into that structure that they've created. And if we can't stop them, they're going to be able to outgun us by 100 or 1,000-1 using our own money, and it's going to be very difficult to win any political fights going forward. So it's really important that we expose this. It's a structural issue that affects all of the other policy fights that we have going on.
Yeah, I was just watching while I was eating lunch, and I don't know why I chose to ruin my lunch by doing this, but I was watching the 33-minute video of Van Jones on the White House Q&A on their own website, and you could see sort of the glee as he was talking about the kinds of budgetary numbers that they have to throw at so many of these programs, and you realize that it's a staggering amount of resources they now have to push these agendas. Okay, and we have a bunch of questions, and there's a lot of people chatting that are watching live right now. Of course, if you're watching on demand later, tough luck, you can't ask live questions. But you can ask questions in the chat or on InstaMessage. But let me ask you this, Phil, before we go any further. Americans for Prosperity. Let's get the background on you, the organization, why you're interested in this, just sort of the bona fides before we move forward. What is Americans for Prosperity?
Americans for Prosperity is a national grassroots organization dedicated to educating, training, and mobilizing regular citizens to become part of the public policy process, federal, state, and local, from the perspective of limited government, fiscal responsibility, transparency, those traditional core fiscal values, free market conservative values. We've got about 700,000 members now in all 50 states. We also have full-time staff on the ground in 25 states. We're a successor to the old Citizens for a Sound Economy that some folks might remember from the fights over Hillary Care and the BTU tax back in the early 1990s. And we're trying. There are no shortcuts here. You've got to sort of build. It's not easy work to build a real grassroots presence with staff and real activists on the ground all over the place. But we saw in fight after fight over the size of government, the left has the troops that'll show up, that'll fight hard, that'll be heard. They're mostly being paid for with our own dollars. They're the public employee unions, the trial lawyers, the environmental groups, and so on. They got a bunch of college kids and so on. So what we wanted to do, instead of the right always having to sort of play catch-up, put together ad hoc coalitions, we really wanted to build a standing army of folks who care about these issues, who know how to make a difference. And so when fights come up, we can get them the talking points they need and turn them loose. And that's what we've been building over the past 5 years at AFP.
So do you consider yourself an un-American AstroTurf organization?
Well, that's what I heard. That's what I heard from our friends at MSNBC and in the administration. Look. My take on that is basically this talking point was a manufactured fake talking point. It started on the Think Progress blog of the Soros and Sandler-funded Center for American Progress. They wrote it on a Friday. It was then sent around the universe in a Democratic National Committee press release. It was then picked up by every Democrat, the New York Times, and the White House the following Monday. Tell me if that isn't an AstroTurf Soros-funded fake message machine. Contrast that with what we're doing, which is just getting information to real folks out on the ground and turning them loose. I think it's pretty clear who's genuine grassroots and who's AstroTurf.
Yeah, I think the green and the banner we're showing your website right now is it looks like more like real grass to me than it does AstroTurf, just for the record. So okay, now let's getting back to the what we've been examining here about Van Jones, and we'll get to Jeff Jones here in a second.